This is Noah with Connective Climbing, and today we'll be going over some short climber tips, expanding on things we've gone over in the past on our short form content, TikTok, Instagram, etc. Not all of these things are going to be explicit tips per se, but there's going to be 5 ideas that we go over today that we can expand on in future videos I think can help you, especially if you find that your height limits you or you think that your height is one of the things holding you back in your climbing. So background on both myself and Brooke, I'd say both of us are on the shorter end for climbers. I'm about 5'4", and I have a minus half an inch of wingspan. And then Brooke is about 5'2". She's about 5'1". Brooke's about 5'1", and she has about an even wingspan. So I'd say both of us typically end up on the shorter end. A lot of these tips are things that I've learned over my coaching, route setting, and climbing time of about 7-8 years. Same with Brooke. She's also been climbing for a similar amount of time. I've also learned from a bunch of other coaches, content creators, people I've climbed with. So this is a culmination of a bunch of different ideas from a bunch of different people. So we hope that you guys can find these tips as well as exercises helpful. My very stinky Scarpa Dragas. So the first thing I wanted to talk about, even before we get started on tips or tricks, exercises, is mindset. This is the biggest thing that can hold you back. I think short climbers, myself included, I love to make excuses. It's so easy. I can't do that. It's too far. It's too reachy. Yes, it's good to acknowledge that, but also you need to learn how to use that to fuel your climbing and to solve the problem rather than just make that a stopgap, just like, oh, I can't do it. There is always a way to solve that problem. You can look at so many professional climbers that climb inside, climb outside. Not everyone is 6 foot tall. I'd say most professional climbers in both the comp scene and climbing outdoors, they're not all super tall. So mindset is a huge thing. This could be, I could talk a whole lifetime about this. The thing that I find most helpful is, like I said, using your height to your advantage or figuring out how you can solve the problem rather than use your height as something that will hold you back. The second tip is learning your climbing style can help you immensely as a shorter climber. So as a shorter climber, you oftentimes, I think, like I said, you'll realize like, oh, maybe I can't reach this. Or, oh, this hold is too far away. That's kind of the most common scenario. So the second tip in learning your climbing style, for example, my climbing style, I love hand-foot matching. Some people say that I climb like frog style, so I'm constantly squeezing things with my feet. I'll reach up to a hold instantly, I'll hand-foot match. So I'm trying to like utilize my smaller box or my flexibility in combination with my smaller span. I'm trying to utilize this to my advantage. So let's say if I'm super spanned and I can't move out of this position, I'll think, okay, using my style that I like to climb in, that I feel strong in, how can I use that to help me solve this problem? So learning your climbing style can be something that you do over the course of a long period of time. It can be something you can do over a short period of time. It's going to constantly change. But some examples of shorter climbers with a specific style. Climbers that, let's say they are smaller, they love to crimp. They realize, like, okay, my strength is in my fingers. So how can I utilize that to the best of my ability? Here's an example of a professional climber. Another example of a smaller climber who can figure things out. So there's a Japanese climber, her name is Aimori. She's absolutely insane at climbing on slab or solving problems and being totally in control. So she utilizes her endurance and her footwork to solve problems. So with your mindset as a short climber, like I said, a lot of times you use it as an excuse. Yes, that's fine. As climbers, we just make excuses. It's part of the game. However, I think the biggest training that you can do through your climbing, but also just in life, is thinking, okay, I've got this thing that's holding me back. How can I use that as motivation or as fuel to learn, to improve? You know, you can kind of change this in many scenarios, but There's a lot of things that, as a shorter climber, they are advantages. It's hard for short climbers, I think, to see this. Sorry if I'm calling you out, but there are a lot of things that taller climbers, they simply can't do that a shorter climber can do. It goes both ways. So, like I said, spending time practicing the things that you hate, practicing the things you don't like, climbing on boulders or routes that you find to be a challenge, that's one of the best things you can do. So this is on the wall and off the wall. Off the wall, focusing on analyzing how you're feeling, thinking about how you're feeling. You're allowed to feel these things. Don't want you to think you're not allowed to feel this frustration. That's very, very normal. Everyone's going through that. But then on the wall, embracing that, learning about it, learning about yourself and how you climb, learning your style, etc. But then also when you're on the wall, think, okay, I can't reach this hold. I can't span this. What's another solution? What's another way I can solve this problem? I think that's going to be one of the biggest tips for you. And again, I could have a whole video about this, and it's something that I'm working on too. So, with this mindset topic that we're talking about, I encourage you use positive talk when you're on the wall, positive talk when you're off the wall. Negative thoughts in the middle of a climb when you're trying to focus, you're thinking like, oh, I'm just too short. Oh, I just can't reach that. Those are things that are going to hold you back. What I encourage you to do, use positive talk, think, okay, I'm in the middle of this crux move. I can do this. I'm able to make this move. I have a solution. Those are things that I encourage you to do. Again, positive self-talk with all of this is going to be extremely helpful in the long run. Climbing is supposed to be fun. If you're not having fun, if you're talking down to yourself, if you let those negative thoughts linger in your mind, 1, you're not going to be having fun. 2, you won't be able to perform. And 3, this will just hurt you in the long run. Our third tip is to be creative with your footwork. As a shorter climber, you're going to find that maybe your arms get spanned more easily. You can't reach the hold immediately. So this is when we can use smaller stature to our advantage. Now, I mentioned this earlier in my own climbing style. Hand-foot matching can be absolutely one of the biggest tools that you can use. So when I say the term hand-foot match, if you've never heard the term, essentially you're going to be talking about when you're on these holds, putting your foot on the same exact hold that your hand is already on. So this requires a few things. It requires a little bit of mobility as well as some practice. So if you guys would like to try a very basic exercise, find an easier warm-up climb and practice hand-foot matching. So this will be one of a few exercises we have. I'll do it real quick over here. So I'm just going to pick this V0. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try my best to make some bigger moves. And once I've made the bigger move, my goal is to put my foot where my lower hand is. So my lower hand is here. I'm going to put that foot there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a big move. And then I'm going to try to put my foot where my other hand is. Now, obviously, I'm not going to do it on the last hold. But that is a very basic exercise that you can do to practice the idea of hand-foot matching. You'll find that it'll pay dividends in steeper climbing. So again, footwork is one of these topics. I'm specifically talking about hand-foot matching right now. There's a lot more options. A lifetime's worth of learning and skills you can take. But here's some other options for you if you're thinking about being creative with your footwork. Smearing on the wall. A lot of times you can smear in a spot that somebody else couldn't because you can get your foot higher. You can also hand heel match. You can hand toe hook match. You can bicycle. There's a million options, and these all can be compounded on top of each other. The idea of hand-foot matching can be comboed with all these and open up an entire world of new options that maybe a taller climber can't do. The next tip we have is using your full range. Now this is, again, a broad topic, but we're going to use a few small examples to give you an idea of what I mean by this. In our previous example of footwork talking about hand-foot matching, this is the idea of how small can we make our range, right? How high can I get my foot? The other thing that as a short climber you want to practice is using really low feet. If you're smaller in stature, your reach is smaller, a low foot for you is just maybe a normal foot for everybody else. So if you feel like you're super extended, you need to be comfortable climbing in a super extended position. Unfortunately, you don't always have a high foot option. Sometimes you are left with very limited options, and sometimes that means you need to be comfortable climbing in a full starfish, or you're completely spanned in this direction. So this is what we can do to practice that. Now, for this example, I'm going to try to keep my feet as low as possible and see how extended I can get. So we're going to start here, pick the lowest foot options available, and I'm going to move my hands, and move my foot to the next option. Maybe I could go to the next one? No, I can't. Oh, okay. Okay, so right now, I might look really silly, but what I'm doing is my right foot is super extended, but you can see I just have a tiny amount of my shoe rubber that's holding me on the wall. And this is a skill in itself, is how extended can you be, but keep those feet on the wall, as opposed to losing them like that. So, if you can master the idea of being really extended, but also really scrunched, this will be an extremely powerful tool throughout your entire climbing. So utilizing your full range, again, this encompasses a lot of ideas. Chris Hampton with the Power Company podcast has talked quite a bit about this recently. He talks about this idea of your usable range. So you might have a range that you feel comfortable climbing in. Let's say you feel comfortable climbing like this, with your arms slightly bent, but the moment your arms are straight, you can't do anything. You feel stuck. This idea of being able to extend your usable range, open up those shoulders a little bit more, extend the legs a little bit more, this is all something that is practiced and learned. Our last explicit tip here. You might not like this one, you might love this one, we'll see. The last tip is to embrace climbing dynamically, especially as a shorter climber. This is one of those tips that, again, is very broad, but if you think about this, as a smaller climber, if you're going to just try to static through everything, that's one option for sure. But your usable range, if you think about it this way, you can open that range even more if you're willing to climb dynamically. So, a few examples. Yes, you can just jump to the hold, but I also mean being able to dead point comfortably, being able to latch a hold that's really far away and lose your feet, being able to cut feet and get back on the wall real quickly. This idea of climbing dynamically, if you're already turned off by this idea, just remember, it doesn't have to be an all-out dyno. Climbing dynamically, what we mean by this is using your momentum and not keeping as many points on the wall as possible. Get comfortable with losing the feet, get comfortable with dead pointing to a hold, get comfortable with dynoing too, maybe. So here's an example of a jump start boulder with a huge first move. I think a lot of times a shorter climber would look at this boulder and either, one, just be like, I'm not going to do that. That's too far. The moves are too big. What I encourage you to do is the opposite. Think, okay, I'm going to try this, even if you're only projecting one move at a time. If you could just stick this one move or get close with this one move, we've learned something. Okay, so this is an example of a very powerful boulder, campusing through these big moves. That took me years of practice. It's like the idea of campusing or dead pointing, all of these things are things I encourage you to practice, especially if you feel like, oh, my wingspan's not very big. All right, we've talked about a lot of things here. All of these ideas can probably be hours and hours of coaching, teaching, practicing. Take these simple ideas, take these ideas, use them in your own climbing. Think about, okay, What's one of these that I want to practice in a session? Don't take all this information and try to use it in your next boulder. That's just way too much. Take just a few of these ideas, maybe one, and I encourage you to think about those in your next session. If you're a shorter climber, don't compare yourself to anyone else. Don't compare yourself to shorter climbers. Don't compare yourself to taller climbers. Think about where you're at, and don't let your height determine how you'll climb. If you want to learn more of these quick tips and tricks, you can check us out on TikTok and Instagram. We're going to hopefully continue to post more of these long-form videos just because, like I said, there's so much information that we'd love to talk about. We simply don't have enough time. So follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and subscribe.